Hi, it's National Women's History Month, and we are so excited at the Community Faith Church that we are featuring a series of women this month who all fit the description of women's history. They are impactful women. In fact, we're talking about women of impact. That's what we're calling it at the COF. And of course, we took the liberty of going beyond February into March with Black History Month. So this is Black History Month too. All right. So that's how we do it at the COF. But I'm so honored and delighted and humbled to be in the home of an amazing woman I've known for a very long time, Miss Carol Galloway. How you doing?
Fine, Bishop. How you doing?
I'm doing amazingly well. Glad to be with you always. I'm still laughing from our previous conversation. But it's good to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad to have you here as well.
Yeah. Now, we're talking about women of impact, and wanted to have the opportunity to help people to get to know Carol Galloway, right? We know, we've seen you in the news and the city council and the school board, the NASB board. You do a lot more than that, but you still have all this energy and passion. So let's talk a little bit about where you come from. You're native Houstonian?
Yes, I was born at the Negro Hospital.
Wow.
Yes,
The Negro Hospital. That was the name of it.
That was the name of the hospital, Negro Hospital.
And people need to understand that was actually a name of the hospital, Negro
That's
Hospital.
Right. Negro Hospital in Third Ward.
In Third Ward.
Which changed to Riverside later on in the years. Yes.
Yeah. So Negro Hospital in Third Ward, and wow, that's a history by itself.
Right.
How often do you have to say that and people wonder, are you serious?
I know they do. They ask. They do. Some people do ask. I don't know. I'm a native Houstonian. They say when you find very few native Houstonians now, and yes, I was born in Negro Hospital, so they're amazed when they hear that name, Negro Hospital.
Yeah.
Yes,
So in that hospital, for example, only blacks were born there.
Oh yes, that was the upscale hospital at the time. It just opened, and it was like the private hospital. Most African Americans during that time had midwives, or they went to what they call Jefferson Davis.
Davis.
But other than that, when anyone went to Negro Hospital with a private doctor and then a private hospital, then that means you had a little change.
That was saying something.
Right.
I gotta teach my dad because my dad was born in Jeff Davis.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and so you grew up. Where did you go to school?
I went to Ryan Elementary out on Harley Street, as well as E.O. Smith and Phyllis Wheatley High School. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I know we're gonna get to talking about E.O. Smith and Phyllis Wheatley.
Right.
My mother was there.
That's right.
At E.O. Smith.
Your mother, your uncle.
My uncle,
Yes.
all at E.O. Smith and
Yes,
then Wheatley.
Right.
Yeah. What's the difference? I know that when my mother talks about E.O. Smith and Wheatley, they talk about it with such pride and a sense of family and community that you don't hear much when you talk to kids about the schools they attend these days. Tell us about life in the school life, and what made it so special.
Well, you had so much support from your parents as well as the entire community, because, like they said, take a village to raise a child.
Yeah.
Every community, they had persons who was watching you when you leave out your home, going down the street, and they would call your parents because everybody in the community was your parents.
Wow.
The teachers was also like your parents, because your parents gave them permission to do whatever it takes to make sure that you're learning. So it was just one big happy family when we came along, and it's such a difference now.
Well, the teachers were not just instructors
Right.
of a lesson
Right.
and a lesson plan. They were invested in your life.
That's right, and they made sure that you were taught and learned, because I came up in the segregated era. So they want to make sure that our kids we knew, and we got a quality education, one of the best. And I wish it was similar to that now, but it's not.
Yeah. Now, when you went to the school board at HISD,
Yes,
times have changed.
yes.
How did your upbringing in school impact what you tried to get done at HISD to make it better?
Well, I was trying to make sure that our students had equality as the schools across town. I knew my schools very well. because I was a PTA president, a regional vice president of the PTAs. I used to organize parents in schools at a PTA and educate them as to why they should be involved and participating. So I knew that many schools was lacking the resources. So I wanted to make sure, and the enrollment was going down in the schools that I represented as well. So it just so happened we had I would think, a great superintendent at the time. And I spoke with him, I met with him, I had him to go in 2 of my schools with me so he could see that the students did not have the proper resources in order to get a quality education.
Wow. So education disparity based on the lack of equal investment
Right.
was a real issue, and I think it's still an issue, of course,
course.
in so many areas. And most people don't really understand it.
That's right.
Would not even expect it to be the case.
That's true.
Now, before we go into your public service life, because you just mentioned you were PTA president and the regional PTA leader, you're doing all this, and that's volunteer.
Oh yeah,
right?
volunteer.
And the board member at HSD is volunteer.
Right.
You went to city council and after that. But let's go back, because when you came out of Phyllis Wheatley as a Wildcat
Yes.
and college,
No, marriage.
marriage.
Oh, marriage.
Wow.
I married the most wonderful guy that I went to school with. He just worshiped me, and I had to corral him,
Yeah.
and I had to tell him, you only worship God, because God would take me away from you, so you cannot worship me.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
So he changed, and so he was very supportive of whatever endeavor I tried.
Good. And you entered the work life. I know you were working at one time. You for what company did you tell me?
Oh, I was the third black that was hired at Texas Instruments.
Yeah.
And this was as soon as they signed the Civil Rights Bill. I already had done my research and knew that the telephone company, Southwest Mail, and Texas Instruments were one of the 2 major corporations that paid more than school teachers make. And of course, I taught music. That's what I did in my home. I had a private studio. I was a private music teacher right after I married. That's what I did. And so I closed down my music studio, and I went and applied to Texas Instruments because my husband didn't want me to work.
Okay.
He wanted me to stay home and be a mother and housewife. But that's not me. I'm a very outgoing person. I got a lot of energy.
Yeah, you do.
And so I just had to get out of the house and do something. I just wanted to change courses in my life. So I was the third black at Hardin Texas Instruments. I was the first black to be promoted into office at Texas Instruments and over the department. And that was because I worked and saved the company millions of dollars, because at the time when I went there, I had to take this extreme test. This test was something. And I passed. And so they called me within 3 days. And as they started, all the African Americans, all blacks, we had to start on the assembly line. So I was on the assembly line. I'd never been into a computer company. Oh, it was just awesome. I could not believe it, how they made all these computers. It was seismic computers for oil. And so when I went in there, and they gave me, after they trained me for 2 weeks, they gave me my first job. And when they gave me my first job, it has a time on it. And the time said it takes 40 hours to do these PC boards. This is where you mount different electronic parts, capacitive resistors, and those things onto this board to go into the computer. So I was working, and I guess the dexterity in my fingers, being a musician, it enabled me to work fast with my fingers. And so I finished the job in 20 hours, not 40.
Wow.
And I was sitting next to Anglo white elderly lady. She perhaps was about in her late 40s, early 50s. And she turned to me and she says, well, Carol, you know, you sure did finish those boards fast. Now, if they go back, you're going to go to inspection. If they come back, Carol, I'm letting you know, you make mistakes and they get rejected, they're going to terminate you after the second rejection you have. I looked at her and I said, oh, really? I said, trust me, darling, I do perfect work. They're not coming back. And sure enough, they didn't come back. And this went on for about every job I got, it was cut in half. So finally, the vice president, after I had been employed there for about 3 months, the vice president came and he asked, where is Carol Galloway? And my supervisor said, she over there. And the little white lady sitting next to me, she says, Carol, I think they calling your name. She said, ooh, if the vice president never came down here. She said, you must really be in trouble. I say, oh, you think so? I said, well, we'll see. So he come over, he says, Carol, could you come and follow me? I said, sure. So I got up, I went to his office on second floor in the corner, great big, huge office. He had me to sit in front of his desk. He says, Carol, he said, I want to commend you. He said, your work is outstanding. He said, I never imagined that the time it takes to do these jobs, that you have cut every one that you did, and they have been perfect in half.
In half.
The time. He said, you have set a new standard. I said, really? He said, but see.
You set a new standard.
Yeah, a new
Wow.
standard.
Wow.
But doing those PC boards.
Yeah.
He said, so what I want you to do, we want to promote you and put you in the wiring division. We're going to teach you how to wire all these chassis, and you're going to go to days. At that time, I was working 5 to 1, so my husband be home with the kids, so that way we could work everything out. So I said, okay. And so I came, he said, so you tomorrow, don't come in. Start Monday and come in up in the day. We're going to train you on the wiring, because that's where we really need to try to save time, because it takes so long to wire all these chassis. That's okay. And so that's what I did.
Wow.
And I did the same thing there, cut time in half. A bunch of Anglo white folks was getting fired because they couldn't keep up with the pace of the time that I had set on the board. So they were getting terminated.
Yeah, wow.
So they put me in the wiring. So I went in the wiring. I changed the time on how long it takes to do a job. So the vice president came to me again. He said, Carol, you have really saved us some money. You don't know you have saved the company Dixon $1 million. I said, really? He said, what we're going to do, we're going to have you work with the engineers, and you will do all the prototypes. And you will set, that way you set the time for every computer to be built.
Wow.
And so that's where I was promoted to. And they said, Carol, what you want to do? We want to send you to college. We're going to pay everything. And he said, only you cannot go any higher than you are now. You got to have a college degree. I said, okay. So they sent me to school to become an engineer. So I went to University of Houston, and I tell you, that was the most boring schooling I had for a whole year. But I did make B's and A's.
Yeah.
I told him, I said, sir, I just can't do that. I cannot be an engineer. It's too boring. Because I was a communicator. And I knew this, you know. And so that was my niche.
Wow.
So they did, then they appointed me as supervisor over making sure that every part in the computer that we built was correct.
This is amazing.
Yes.
I mean, so this is kind of a hidden figure story. How did you end up at AT&T?
Well, what happened, they, built a new plant out in Stafford, Texas. So from where I live, going to Stafford, Texas, I burned out 2 cars, I think. And at that time, they didn't have no freeway all the way. I mean, it stopped there, it was just partial. It was no Southwest freeway all the way. And all my friends who was at AT&T, they sang at Southwest, oh, Carol, you got to come here. And so I got to thinking, I said, wow. So I checked what they were paying. I said, well, it'll be a little pay cut. I said, but that's okay, because I'll save on gas and the wear and tear of a car. So I went and I applied for Southwestern Bell.
Southwestern Bell.
And and I was hired as a representative in the business office.
Did you see racism there?
Oh, did I? Because I was like the 5th black in a business office. Southwestern Bell at the time, they were only hiring blacks as director assistants and operators.
My mother was one of those.
Yes, and see, that's where they were hired. But I scored high enough to work in the business office.
Okay.
And so when I went in there, I had one of the most racist supervisors. And of course, I immediately joined the union because I tried to get a union at Texas Instrument. I was the organizer. I went to the Teamsters Union because I didn't like where they was treating my black friends on the assembly line. I was the token black, okay? So I went to the Teamsters Union to organize a union at Texas Instrument.
Wow.
And of course, the vice president called me in and wanted to know why.
Right, yeah.
And I told him I was a token, but the way they was being mistreated and discriminated against, I felt like it was my duty to help them. And so that's the reason I went to where there was a union.
Okay.
And I immediately joined the union, became a steward in the business office. And of course, my supervisor was always harassing me. I was good at what I did, so I would file grievances. And I had probably about 15 or 20 of them pending against her. And I was off to my desk all the time in grievances. And so finally they left me alone after because I wasn't working, I was having hearings all the time. So, and then I started working with the union and I was elected to the board. And I was on the legislative committee, and I used to go to Austin. I was a certified lobbyist in Austin for the union.
For the union. So I'm listening to your life because, you know, often you talk to people that say, "Oh, I'm so tired. I just don't have time. And you ask them, well, what do you do? I go to work. I take care of my kids. I say, what else?
You're right.
You know, but we're listening to you. You're raising kids, you got a family, you're working, you're in the union, you're in the PTA, you're leading it, and you're doing things to help other people even when it doesn't matter to you personally.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So wow. So you stayed at Southwestern Bell for about how long?
Well, I retired after 33 years, but it being a union, it is so amazing. I was pulled out. The AFL-CIO one time. They hired me. So I got a union leave. So I was on a union leave for 20-something years.
Wow.
So that made my seniority still was going on at the time. So what happened, per our contract, we could only be on a union leave for 20 years.
Okay.
But I was at City Hall, on City Council, and my name fell through the crack with the management at the AT&T. So they called me and said, Councilman, you got to come in and resign. Or retire. I said, what? They said, yes, you're over your stay on union leave. I said, oh my goodness. I said, okay, let me check into it. I won't tell y'all, I skipped that part of the story. But I did later go and retire, which I had a total of 33 years.
33 years. Wow, okay, we're gonna leave part of that out. But I'm excited, it's inspiring to me because you were doing all of this while doing public service. And I'm just trying to paint a picture here because you got a family.
Yes.
You got kids.
Right.
They do all the stuff they do, and you're supporting them.
Right.
At the same time, you're doing public service.
Right.
With a career.
Right. But one thing I didn't do, I didn't become elected to no office. My community wanted me to run for office, school board, way before the time that I did run. Because I told them my kids came first. I was a mother first. And my youngest daughter, which you know, I say, once she leaves school and go off to college, I will consider, because my son, he was very active, he played football. I mean, all my kids were very active in school, and I was there at every program, event, or whatever. I was going to be there with them. So when after my youngest daughter, after she left, went to college, and they kept the ministers all in the area.
I was one of them.
Right? They would try to recruit me to run. And that's what I prayed. I always put God before, because God, you know, I never had a desire to be an elected official, never. That was not my aim. My aim was to be a servant to help my people because I I felt so bad that they was afraid to speak out. Because when the police pulled my father over when I was 9 years old,
Wow.
my father had just bought, that was back in 1949, he just bought a brand new 1949 Chevrolet. We was coming from our country home and down the highway, of course it wasn't no freeways, down South Main, coming from Wharton County.
What?
And the police, as soon as we got to Sugarland where the big Imperial Company, there was a light there, it's Highway 6 now. And my father said, you guys, the Highway Patrol pulled up beside us. He said, told my sister and I, were just the two of us, he said, now you guys be quiet back there. He said, because this officer is looking at me. That means that he is going to pull me over as soon as I take off from this light. I said, oh, Daddy, no. He said, yes. And sure enough, as soon as my father pulled off from the light, the officer put the siren on. And so the officer came and called him a boy. And he had the nerve to say, what you doing driving a car like this? Who car is this? And my father started talking like a slave. He said, yes. I said, what? I told myself, I said, girl, listen there, what is he talking about? My father looked back, he said, I told y'all, be quiet back there. And so my father asked him, did he mind talking like a slave? Did he mind him reaching over in his glove compartment to show the paper? He said, well, how could you get a car like this? My father said, the good old white man in River Oaks, so I works for him. I said, what? You know?
Yeah.
And it was just so hurting. So after he finally saw the papers that my father owned the car, he was the owner, and he told him he didn't want to see us back on the highway no more.
Wow.
And you better get on down this road. Let me catch you down here, down this road. And so after, when that's what started me. I mean, this stayed with me all my life. It really kind of affected me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put on video recording what I really want to say, but but when we started writing, I said, Daddy, I say, why were you talking like that? He said, baby girl, you don't understand. He said, if I hadn't acted that way, that man would have probably taken me off and y'all would never seen your father again. I said, really, Daddy? He said, yes. And that's when my father told me the story, how he got to Houston at the age of 13.
Wow.
And from that story he told me, oh, my whole my life changed.
Wow.
I refused to accept that. And I think that's what inspired me to be and fight for who I am now. Because I was not going to let no one do that to me. Because I even roused up my friends in Wheatley when they started the bus ride to sit in the front. We were transferred to the heart of it. We had to go downtown. We had to ride 2 buses to get to school at Wheatley. And when we get to town, I told them, I said, come on, you guys, we are going to sit in the front of the bus. I said, because we had this one old white bus driver. They didn't have black bus drivers at the time.
No.
And we on the last route, we on the end of the line. So I told them, I said, come on, you guys. Now, I didn't wait no more than a minute. I waited about 80 pounds, but I had a big mouth. So I said, come, we gonna sit. So I sat right behind the bus driver, and all my friends lived out there. They would stand and sit in the front. So then we'd go to the beginning of the line and catch the bus. And so it's so funny. The whites get on the bus, and they'll tell the bus driver, that you get them into the back where they belong. And then I whisper in the bus driver's ear, because I'm sitting right behind him on the little seat facing the aisle. I said, remember now, we at the end of the line. That's what I was whispering to. I said, now you better keep driving and go on. And he did. And then he told me, I can't do nothing with these ends.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. So we did that the whole time.
Wow. Wow. So you've been on the NAACP, an officer in the branch for some years.
Right.
And how long you been in the NAACP?
Well, I can remember we had 4 branches here in Houston back in the, up until 1978. And so the national came through and they pulled the charter on all 4. And they asked me, I was working for the AFL-CIO, to assist them with reorganizing 1 branch in Houston. So that's what I did. I had a radio fund at KCOH, and so we were able to get members, and we had our meeting at the YMCA over on McGowan.
Yeah.
And that's where, and we elected temporary officers, and I was on the executive committee at that time.
At that time?
Yeah, I didn't want to be in the office. I was on the executive
The
committee.
yeah.
And so that was back in 1978.
Wow.
Yeah, and I've been on ever since.
Ever since.
Yeah.
And I'm so honored to have you serving as my vice president right now. You know, and I think about the fact that you and my mother been friends since y'all were kids.
Yes, right.
And now I get the chance to have the mentorship and partnership with you on the board, as an officer. Your passion, I'm understanding it better now, as you've explained that episode when you were a little girl with your father. And then you remember what your father told you about how he got to Houston. And I know that must be a pretty serious story as well. So people need to understand that your passion for serving and doing social justice comes from the pain of personal experience.
Right, yeah.
How important is it that we get new generations to understand why they gotta serve like this?
I think we as a people, we should tell our stories, the ones that are still here. See, our young people don't know the story. I wouldn't have known the story either if my father hadn't told me. His mother, the white man came to their home for my father to work on a Sunday. His brother's in the field. My grandmother refused. She said, my boys, we go to church on Sunday. My boys don't work. That is the Sabbath day, and they don't work. So the white rancher got upset. My grandmother she was standing with her gun on the porch because my grandfather had gone off somewhere, working somewhere else. And she was standing on the porch with her shotgun. And it accidentally went off. And the horses that the rancher had, the white rancher had, they took off. And my father was hiding behind a tree at the time. So my grandmother told him to come in the house, and they ran off with the horse. She said, baby, I know they're going to come back here, and they're going to try to get you and take you, and there's no telling, and I can't fight them off because your dad not here. She said, I'm going to pack you up some things, and you just hightail it and go, and she gave him some money, and he left. And that night, they came back, poured gasoline around my grandmother's home, and set it on fire. And she had to get out of there with her and his other siblings. And I guess that's the reason I'm so passionate about what I do.
Wow. You know, we see things like that in movies. But as you just said, if people don't tell those stories,
Right.
then their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren
That's right.
don't pick up on it.
That's right.
And there's stories in all of our families, if we would just tell them.
Right.
And that's so profoundly powerful. If you haven't lived that,
Right.
you don't understand that.
That's right.
And only somebody who's lived it like you have can share it. I think that, you know, if we don't reach younger generations, organizations like the NACP
Right.
and others are going to suffer.
That's right.
And we need them now. We see it so desperately.
Oh, we really need them now.
Yeah.
I just feel so sorry every time I hear about one youth getting shot or killed. It just breaks my heart. I mean, we're losing, and there's no love among our young people like it was when we came along. When I came along, we all loved each other. Everybody in the neighborhood know everything. It was, we had a bicycle. It was 4 of us, 5 of us. We ride on one bicycle. Somebody on the handlebars, and one on the seat, the other standing up pumping, and two on the back. You know, it was just, it's totally different now.
You mentioned church.
Yes.
You grew up in church.
Oh, yes, I was a musician. All my life, I played for church for 12 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if I could just put this picture together, because, you know, people know Carol Galloway, the elected official, the school board member, the NACP member, the union
Right.
worker, and all of that. But it's really Carol Galloway, going to church,
Yeah,
playing the piano,
right.
and you're in church right now. I mean, I'm
Right.
saying, how important is your faith in all of this journey?
This is the only way, where I'm today. It was because of my faith, because like I say, I guess God ordered my steps because I never had no desire to do. I'm a person who like to work behind the scenes. I never had a desire to be out in front. But when I did, I told him I pray for anything. Before I do anything, I go to him, and he'll make a way. He'll show you. And when they asked me to run for office, I said, okay, Lord, if you want, you got to put it there for me. And it did. Everything just fell in place.
Yeah.
It was such an easy campaign and enjoyable. And so, and I keep him in my life all the time, all the time.
I want you to take the last minute and just look at the camera and say to the younger generation of young ladies, young women, who need to understand their value and how they can make a difference if they commit their lives to being a life that God can use.
Well, what I would say to the young people, first of all, you have to love yourself. But you must know that God loves you because God loves all his children. If you don't have love at home or whatever, just think about God. He loves you, and anything desire in your heart, if you respect yourself, respect others, God will take care of the rest of you. And you must believe and have faith, because without faith, you cannot survive. So keep the faith and know that God is with you at all times. And that's what I would like to say to my young people. And if there is not the source that you need, there's always someone waiting in the wings to assist you whatever you need. So just take your time and remember, God loves you.
This is Miss Carol Galloway. It's National Women's History Month. She's definitely a woman of impact.